Hello and welcome back to The Context USA with me, Helena Humphrey in London.
And me, Katrina Perry in Washington. NASA says construction of a new base at the lunar South Pole will begin over the next 7 years, establishing a permanent human presence on the moon.
Well, we'll have more on that a little later, but first it feels that there's always someone somewhere going to the polls in the United States, and today we are looking once again at Texas as Republicans are voting to pick their candidate to contest a Senate seat.
Now, what makes this race really interesting is that President Trump has chosen not to endorse the four-term sitting Republican Senator John Cornyn, but rather he's thrown his weight behind the challenger candidate, the current State Attorney General Ken Paxton.
Now, neither candidate got enough votes in the original primary election in March to move forward as the party's candidate, so they face a second round or runoff election today.
The winner will face the Democratic candidate for Senate, James Tallarico, a current state representative in Texas, in the overall election for the Senate in November. Now, we'll hear a little bit more from Texas later on, but first let's hear from our panel as we'll bring them in. We have with us John Thomas and Joel Rubin. And John, I'll go to you first because you are a Texan, so you have an insight here. What's your sense of where this is going? Is it kind of a referendum on President Trump amongst the Republican Party in Texas?
A little bit. This is an incredibly interesting race. I just cast my ballot this morning. And, you know, a lot of people are looking at President Trump. He was under a lot of pressure from the establishment within the Republican Party to endorse the incumbent John Cornyn. He even was coming so close as to right after the initial primary, he allegedly had a drafted tweet in favor of endorsing Cornyn, and he pulled it, only to turn around a few weeks later and endorse Ken Paxton. And so people are wondering what happened there. I think a little bit more simplistic view might be appropriate here. Post the initial primary, we have a 60-day runoff period, which is what we're at today. And really, if you look at polling, irrespective of President Trump, Paxton was ahead anywhere between 5 to 15 points. So Paxton was likely to be the nominee. It just made it spicier that President Trump finally decided to weigh in and probably end this runoff in favor of Paxton.
Well, there is plenty of spice in American politics, as it is, John, isn't there, without adding extra spice here and there along the way. But,
yes.
Joel, I'll come back to you in a moment. I just want to head down to Dallas now because we have Bloomberg's Texas bureau chief with us there, Julie Fine, who has been monitoring the minutiae of this. Julie, how are things looking today? I know there was a record turnout for the first primary, even though neither candidate got over the line, so to speak. How are things looking today?
Well, obviously, in the primaries in general, there is a lower turnout than there are in the general elections, especially in a presidential election. However, both candidates are very hopeful that they can turn out some numbers today. One thing that's working in their favor, it's a beautiful day here, no rain. It's not too hot. So they're hoping they can get enough people out. Here is really the situation here. The way the primary works in the state of Texas, if you voted in the Democratic primary, you cannot vote in this runoff. If you voted in the Republican primary, you can vote in the runoff. If you didn't vote in either, you can vote in the runoff. So what John Cornyn is hoping today is that people who did not vote in the primary really get out there in this runoff, because Ken Paxton does have a lead in the polls, and that was before he was endorsed by President Trump.
Is it realistic of John Cornyn to think that he can beat Ken Paxton today, as you say, with that endorsement and with all that's gone on?
Well, certainly things are leaning in Ken Paxton's favor. However, John Cornyn has been a senator. He's been there for 4 terms. He has the establishment behind him. He has the money behind him. He's greatly outraised Ken Paxton. However, Ken Paxton, with fewer dollars, has managed to get better numbers in the polls. However, if you do remember from the original primary, John Cornyn edged out Ken Paxton by more than a point. It was close, but he did have that edge. He's hoping that will continue this time around.
And does John Cornyn and his supporters feel a little bit hard done by in terms of not getting the president's endorsement and some of the comments the president has made about him recently? I mean, he has been quite loyal to President Trump.
He's voted with him more than 95% of the time. I believe it's 99% of the time. What's very curious about this is right after the primary, President Trump said he was going to endorse, and reports were that he was going to endorse John Cornyn. So obviously this was a blow to a campaign that was seeing its numbers not as high as Ken Paxton's.
And Julie, the other, I suppose, point to mention is waiting for whoever gets over the line today is the Democratic Senate candidate, Tallarico, waiting there patiently, already able to campaign, knowing that he is the candidate. What kind of race is being set up here?
Well, that's what's very interesting. While the two Republican candidates have been going at it, James Tallarico can simply raise money. He's shown that he has been able to do that. However, he has not been tested that much besides the Democratic primary. Now he's going to go up against a Republican. You're going to see this race really begin here. James Tallarico has a very good reputation in the state house here in Texas. However, Republicans are going to say that he is too liberal for Texas. We'll see how that plays out.
Exciting, spicy times ahead today and the next few months. Julie Fine, there, Bloomberg's Texas Bureau Chief. Thank you for joining us here on BBC News.
Well, let's bring back in our panel then. Joel, coming to you on all of this, how do you think the Democrats are watching this? Do you think they have a preferred Republican candidate to come out of this?
Yeah, Helen, it's a win-win, quite frankly, because first of all, we should remember that John Cornyn might be the #1 fundraiser for Senate Republicans outside of Mitch McConnell, who's also retiring. Cornyn has raised about $400 million. So if he goes down with the help of Donald Trump, that only helps Democrats in terms of recapturing the Senate. And in terms of Texas, look, you know, Paxton is a very damaged candidate. He is a toxic brand. And Democrats, we feel like we have a possible winner here. And this is going to mobilize a lot of support nationally. It's going to raise a lot of money, but it's also going to cost Republicans. This is not a race where they should be spending money. It's like Democrats having to spend a lot of money to keep a seat in California. It's a waste. So that's going to suck more energy out of the Republicans. Tallarico is a very attractive candidate. Paxton will carry a lot of baggage, and it will be after a vicious primary. So we'll see how this turns out. But either which way, this is a net positive for Democrats.
Yeah, as you say, got to see which way that primary shakes out first. We do just want to bring you some other election-related developments first, because we've spoken a lot about redistricting on this programme. Today, a federal district court has blocked Alabama from using a new congressional map, which was agreed by lawmakers in 2023.
Yeah, the court labelled the plan, which includes one majority black district, as racially discriminatory. The three-judge court ordered Alabama to continue with a court-selected map that had been used in the 2024 election cycle that included two majority black districts.
Now, the court found that Alabama state lawmakers had changed their map in order to, as they wrote, distribute black voters across districts to dilute their votes, at least in part because they were black.
However, the state can now appeal this decision to the Supreme Court. Let's bring back in our panel, John Thomas and Joel Rubin. We've spoken a lot about redistricting on this programme, and some would say in this cycle, John, it started in Texas. And I just want to go back to something Joel said there. Do you think Democrats can win a Senate seat in Texas this year?
You know, I struggle to see that. I thought Joel's analysis was fairly good, but I would quibble with a couple points. One is, yes, is this runoff or general election going to be more expensive than it otherwise had to be if Cornyn was on the ballot? Absolutely. But I also would say what we saw with Beto O'Rourke, the former Democratic nominee for the U.S. Senate in Texas a few years ago, is Democrats get worked up into a lather at the potential of flipping Texas blue, which means small dollar donors, Democrats, and big dollar donor Democrats are going to be pouring money into Tallarico, money they otherwise could have put in competitive Senate seats that might have been better well spent. So look, it's going to be a free-for-all. Paxton's only choice is to define Tallarico early. And by that, that's nice political speak of getting nasty and quick. So it's going to be as a political operative, it's going to be fun to watch that all play out.
Joel, I noticed a smile and a nod from you there. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, look, John's right. I mean, this is definitely going to mobilize a lot of voters. But the good thing about small dollar donors is you can keep on going back to them for small dollar contributions. And, one thing to watch, and this is a big X factor, is the Latino vote. The Latino vote in 2024 did well for President Trump. That's how he ended up winning the White House. But the numbers have flipped overnight, basically, since his policies have come into force, in particular related to ICE. We've seen Latino voters flee the Republican Party, and that is a huge demographic within Texas. And that's really where this race will likely be determined. And I think it's very much up for grabs.
John, what's your view on that, the role of the Latino voters, not just in Texas, but more broadly across the country?
Oh, yeah, I completely agree with Joel. That's going to be the swing demographic that's likely going to decide this contest. And that's why you're going to see Republicans and Ken Paxton go in hard against Tallarico on the issue of culture wars. That's where there is a distinguishing difference between Democrats and Republicans is on cultural and social issues. So I think you're going to see that Republicans are going to try to go early in defining Tallarico as extreme and woke and different on their social issues. And that's the attack zone. I think that actually will resonate quite well because even though Tallarico initially might look good on paper, most Texans don't know who he is. And so that means the first person to introduce new information and define him has a distinct edge. And I think that's what Paxton and the Republicans are going to work to do.
Joel, what do you make of that? Do you think Democrats are ready to go toe-to-toe when it comes to that issue of culture wars? It had been brought up in that DNC autopsy. What do you think?
Yeah, let's not talk about the autopsy, okay? Look, when it comes to Tallarico, that's one of his special ingredients as a candidate that he brings, which is he is, I believe, a pastor. He speaks very much with the language of the evangelical community. He is proudly wearing his religiosity on his sleeve. And so while there are going to be attacks against him, certainly we should expect it. He may have a bit more armor. And he's been able to communicate in ways that is very appealing to undecided voters and certainly to people who care about faith as an issue. And to call him woke and out of the mainstream and then to hear him talk. And with all that money coming in, they'll hear him talk. I think he has a chance to respond to that effectively.
Well, indeed, an interesting contest in Texas ahead, which we will be watching closely on this programme over the next few months. John, Joel, stay with us. Lots more still to come around the world and across the UK. This is BBC News.